You're good to go.
Welcome to our third IAM Canada webinar of a four-part series for 2021, where today's topic will be focused on the asset management journey with a great panel of leaders across the electric utilities industry to share their journeys within their respective organizations. Electric utilities infrastructure, as with many of the critical infrastructure we've seen in the past webinars this year, is essential in providing power to our communities. Good afternoon, my name is Bonnie Tam, and I'm the chair for the IAM Canadian chapter. The IAM's vision is to be recognized as the leading international professional body for asset management. For today, we have a great cross-representation of the electric utility sector, including ENMEX Energy Corporation, Manitoba Hydro, Ontario Power Generation, and Nova Scotia Power. I do want to remind everyone to sign up for our final webinar on December 1st from 3 to 5 p.m., where we will be focused on the housing industry. In addition, I also want to remind everyone that this year, our IAM North American Conference will be held on October 12th to 14th. This year's topic includes the rise of environmental, social, and governance considerations and their impact. And the topics from many different keynote speakers and leaders will be on climate change impacts and opportunities, energy transition and net zero, asset resiliency, social license to operate, cybersecurity, and how to define value and the challenges related to combining quantitative and qualitative factors in decision making, and information management in support of asset management. For those that are not familiar on how to sign up for the conference, in the website of iam.org, clicking on chapters and clicking on Canada, and under events, you can then click to be able to subscribe and attend the IAM North American Conference. You can also take advantage of booking in Canadian dollars for those that are Canadian. These webinars cannot be made possible without our volunteers and our sponsors. And I want to take some time to also thank Eric Goldforth, who's here also to help us in managing this webinar, and also to our special sponsors, Greenman Asset Management Solutions and Copperleaf, and also our sponsors, Planifica, Jacobs, and Akiran. And now I'd like to introduce our first sponsor, Greenman Asset Management Solutions. Greenman Asset Management Solutions is represented here today by Suzanne Greenman, who is the Principal Asset Management Advisor. We will go right into their advertisement, which will pop up as a separate window. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is James Jorgensen, and I'm a board member for the Institute of Asset Management Canada chapter. I've got the job here today of giving you a brief preamble for what we're going to talk about today. And what I'm going to do to do that, if I can sort my slides out here, is talk a little bit about the asset management journey. So the Institute of Asset Management have the asset management journey, and there's a YouTube video of this, so you can search it up just via Google, and you can also go to the Institute of Asset Management website and search for the big picture. And this is the big picture. And what I wanted to do was just highlight a few of the things that we'll be talking about today as organizations go through their journey. So quite often what happens at the beginning of an asset management journey is there's a lot of all reactive decision making within an organization. So everybody's working away, doing their own thing, trying to just get their own job done. And when it comes to interactions, there's often barriers there around different languages, people talking about the same words with a different meaning. I'm sure that's pretty familiar to all of us. As well with that, what you end up is this silo mentality of everyone thinking they're doing their own great job. And that can be a problem in terms of the communication throughout an organization. And also when things go wrong, you end up with that blame game of people trying to say, well, it was another department that was responsible for that issue and not us. So and that's some of the characteristics of the early stages of organizations as they embark on their asset management journeys. At some point, it seems like it all gets too much for an organization, and everybody knows that there must be a better way, but they don't really know exactly what that better way is. And there's often there's direction from the top down, so maybe that's fear of being having a regulatory issue. So management are keen to try and find a solution, and then from the bottom up, the workers in the staff understand that there's a better way, there's a more efficient way to manage their assets. So they start trying to understand what that is, and at some point that critical mass becomes strong enough to actually do something about it. And what happens generally is you end up sitting around a table with all of your peers, all of the different departments, and that's where you start getting this collective decision making, sitting around the table together, understanding each other's issues. And when you do that, you quite often find that there's so much that you don't know. It's at this stage when you realize that one department has got a spreadsheet which is the same as your spreadsheet, but doing a slightly different thing. And you understand that there's work happening that's duplicative, and you're using different data to try and arrive at the same answers. And there's all this uncertainty. There's an understanding that there's a lack of process. So you're talking about these things and you're identifying the issues, and that leads to plans and ideas and strategies for the organization to try and improve itself. So quite often this is when you have a brand new asset management division that's created within an organization, which again can be a silo. There's often sometimes a rush to go out and try and buy the software, the black box idea to fix all of your problems. It will tell you all the answers of what you should do. And this can bring its own problems where you have these new people coming into the organization thinking that they know the best plan and what's best for the organization, trying to tell everyone else what to do and how to do their jobs, and that breeds some conflict. So there's that change management aspect which becomes paramount and really important as organizations navigate through the asset management journey. However, what it does do is eventually people see the light and they understand the key things that they need to work on. So they understand the consistent language of things. They understand of how to talk amongst themselves, and there's a much more of a connected network between the different departments in organizations, that you move towards an area of optimized decision making where you can start to communicate and work within the organization to find the best approaches to the asset management solutions that you're seeking. With that, it often identifies gaps, and gaps often in data. So to do that optimized decision making really highlights the need for the data that you need to have confidence in the outcomes from that decision making process. And that's what we're seeing here on this slide, where you start to treat data as an asset itself, and it becomes really important at every stage of the organization. And through this process, you can try and instill the importance of it right from the data collection, right the way through to the actual decision making. The little bit at the bottom right of the screen there with the two apples, the apple to apple idea is a really key concept in asset management, so that we're understanding the same language, and whenever you're comparing across assets, that you're doing it in a way that's relatable across different assets within an organization. The idea of all of this is to get to a place where you're managing your data, you're making better decisions, which enables your staff in your organization to have more time to think about other things to promote and enhance the organization and the efficiency of it. So you have more space to think long term. You can think about the future in a much more clear way, and a better understanding of the financial issues that are in planning that you're going to have coming up into the future. So that's really just a quick snapshot of the big picture of the asset management journey that we're going to talk about today. Often you talk about characterizing the traits of great asset management organizations. There's a few of them listed here, and I think they'll probably resonate with the organizations that we have here today to talk on the electrical utilities side, and it's been consistent through the other industries that we focused on through this webinar series. So thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to a great panel discussion. Thank you. Two secs, I would just like to introduce our next sponsor, which is Baldwin Nayens from Copperleaf. So over to you, Baldwin.
Thanks, James, and welcome everybody. We're excited to sponsor this IAM event. Of course, as you know, Copperleaf is a big supporter of the IAM. We're big fans, and you know, very much in line with what James was talking about 5 seconds ago. We're, as Copperleaf, in the business of helping you make optimal decisions, because that's what it's all about. And if Harvard Business Review puts it very nicely, you know, ultimately a company's value is just the sum of the decisions that it makes and executes. So clearly, making optimal decisions is key. And if we look at a couple of surveys about decision making, it's not easy. As you can see here, 82% of utilities are actually not quite ready to strike the right balance between innovation and business as usual. 72% of senior executives say that bad strategic decisions are as frequent as good ones, which is kind of worrying. And only 5% of energy utility executives are happy with the way that they're actually currently making investment decisions. So there is room for improvement. And that's what we've been working on, of course, at Copperleaf. We really kind of focus on the decision-making process and the systems that support that process. And that plays out at 3 different time horizons, if you wish. The very long term, which is really predicting the needs of your asset base, which is where the data come in, as James was pointing out a minute ago. Then the fact that you're going to have portfolios of work that you'd like to do, and you have to decide optimally what to do when, in line with the constraints that you might have within your organization, both financial, people, and otherwise. And then finally, once you've made up your mind, you're going to start executing on whatever you've decided to do, but things might go sideways or will go sideways, timing-wise or whatever. And therefore, you have to manage those portfolios to maintain the highest possible performance. And of course, we do all this on a foundation of the key principles, largely of ISO 55000, so value-based and risk-informed decision-making. Many of you will know this as a Copperleaf C55. That's kind of been the product, the flagship product. We've actually this year broken it into 3 big chunks because the functionality keeps growing and it was getting a bit unwieldy. So there is Copperleaf Assets, which is really about managing your assets and coming up with those long-term plans. portfolio, which is really the managing of the portfolios, both in decision making and then in their execution, and then value, which ties into James' point about apple to apple. So in other words, we really need a value framework to be able to value on a common scale all the different factors that you're trying to maximize or minimize within your organization. Now, this has been very popular with today's audience, so basically electrical utilities or power utilities. As you can see from this little screenshot here, a lot of your peers, actually 3 out of 4 of the panelists today are Copperleaf clients. So we'll have to have a little word with Warren later on today to make sure that he joins the club. But worldwide, we by now manage about 2.25 trillion worth in assets, many of them, majority of them actually, in the power utility sector. So with that, we're very excited again to kind of participate in today's, or to sponsor today's session, to hear what our panelists have to say. I also hope to see you all in person one of these days. That would be nice. And in the meantime, stay safe and enjoy this session. And now it's over to Suzanne.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Suzanne Grieman, as you found out earlier, and I am so very pleased to be here and to be co-hosting this session with Wesley Albert from Acuren. Wes, I don't know if you want to raise your hand so they can see you. Excellent. So we have an amazing group of professionals who have agreed to donate their time today. So I'm going to just start by asking them, of course, to introduce themselves. And I'm going to do a quick roundtable and ask each person to give 2 to 3 minutes overview of themselves, their companies, and their corporate asset management journeys to date. So let's start with Warren Rogers of Nova Scotia Power.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, or morning, depending on what part of the country you're sitting in right now. My name is Warren Rogers. I'm an engineering specialist with Nova Scotia Power. I've been in the industry of asset management and reliability since 2000, and I started my career off in the petrochemical business, and then ended up in the utility business in 2007. And I've been performing different roles within Nova Scotia Power since then. And we started our journey back in 2009, 2010. At the time, I was the superintendent of our combustion turbine fleet here at Nova Scotia. And I jumped on the chance to join in this new thing called asset management. I was very familiar with reliability and maintenance engineering, but not really what asset management was. But I thought I could lend a hand. And certainly it has, and for the last over a decade now with Nova Scotia Power, we've developed an asset management team and asset management program that has flourished into something that we started with 4 people, and currently our department is made up of over 50 and includes more than 1 division within Nova Scotia Power. So Nova Scotia Power is an investor-owned utility by our parent company, Emera. Emera owns a number of utilities in Canada, the US, and the Caribbean, as well as interests within Nova Scotia through our very unique Maritime Link, which is underwater DC sub-cable that is going to be taking eventually power from the Muskrat Falls. And we're very happy to be part of those kind of programs with Nova Scotia Power. The asset management program within our company has, in the last couple of years, been spurring off quite a bit of interest within other affiliates within Emera. We have had, and I have traveled to the Caribbean and to our facilities in Florida, Tampa Electric, to talk to them about the kind of things that we do in asset management. And the general interest in the utility sector, I'm finding, and I think panelists would agree, and a lot of you on the call, is that the idea of asset management and reliability in our business has been growing substantially and particularly fast in the last few years, last 5 or 6 years, compared to where we were 10 and 15 years ago. So in our industry here on the East Coast of Nova Scotia as a medium-sized utility. We do have a variety of fuel types, a variety of station types for power generation, transmission, distribution. We have everything from hydro to coal to oil to wind, a little bit of solar. Like I mentioned before, DC underwater cables, which are mysterious for a mechanical engineer, but they do exist, so they tell me. And we play a part in trying to help in the life cycle management of all of those pieces throughout. And I'll pass it over to the next person. Thanks again.
Excellent. Let's have a chat with Maria Neufeld from Manitoba Hydro.
Hello, my name is Maria Neufeld, and up until a few days ago, I led a talented department at Manitoba Hydro to meet the needs of Manitoba Hydro's energy delivery assets by optimizing lifecycle delivery, value, and investment. The assets within my scope included the generating station where the clean water runs through the turbines and gets converted to electricity, gets stepped up to transmission voltage where it travels large distances to the Manitoba load centers, then gets stepped down to serve our end-use customers. A few days ago, I became the Director of Transmission Operations and Maintenance and am now responsible for the longest part of the asset lifecycle for HVDC, AC transmission stations, and transmission line maintenance for Manitoba Hydro. A little bit about Manitoba Hydro. We're a Crown corporation, one of the largest integrated utilities in Canada, and the sole provider of electricity and natural gas in the province of Manitoba. Manitoba Hydro is committed to asset management as a discipline and embraces the need to mature its asset management practices in continuing to create value for our customers. Manitoba Hydro's strategic approach is to leverage asset management to streamline and align the delivery of energy services to customer requirements and to associate the costs of that delivery to the level of service to enable balancing of cost, of performance, risk, and rates to meet customer expectations. Asset management isn't a destination, but rather it's an ongoing journey on multiple fronts to integrate and continuously improve the people, processes, and technologies that make up the asset management system. It's really hard to know when our formal asset management journey began, but we probably didn't call it asset management when it started. I would characterize it more as a crawl, walk, run journey, but there's a couple of milestones that I'd like to talk about. So, as I trace back into our company history, we were starting to introduce some concepts of life cycle considerations while purchasing in about the mid-1990s. In about mid-1990s to the mid-2000 timeframe, we embarked on reliability-centered maintenance timeframe under a functional approach, which I will be talking about later on today, and what happens when you introduce things under a functional approach. But in short, it was implemented to varying degrees across the corporation. We started bringing in some asset management experts to help our functional organizations develop on asset management capability from about 2010 onward. And we had a recognition that we needed to transition to enterprise asset management thinking probably midway through the 2010-2020 decade. We leveraged Copperleaf first in generation and then across the corporation to value investments on the cost of on the balance of cost, performance, and risk. We published our asset management policy in November 2018. We published a strategic asset management plan in February 2020. We created drafts of asset class strategies for priority asset classes in June of 2020, and we're working to continually improve them. It's a journey, and we're still walking forward.
That's excellent. So wide variety of portfolio, just like Nova Scotia Power. Let's move on to Peter Stuckey of NMAX.
Hi, everybody. As Suzanne says, Peter Stuckey of NMAX Energy Corporation. I'm the Director of Asset Management and Quality Assurance for that business unit. A little bit about myself. I started off many years ago in maintenance, working on Panavia Tornado fighter bombers as a maintenance technician. Became a maintenance manager. Went back and went to university and studied integrated engineering. Became an operations engineer. Flew around the world for several years. On Lockheed L-1011 air-to-air refueling aircraft, which is kind of fun. Became a technical instructor and coach. Got into quality management systems, implemented ISO 9001. Came to Canada in about 2007. became the Director of Quality, Safety, Integrity Management and Test Cells for an overhaul company, gas turbine overhaul company. Joined NMAX Energy Corporation in 2014, and then progressed towards asset management in around about 2017. So that's me. NMAX as a whole. NMAX is a vertically integrated business with transmission, distribution and generation functions. It's wholly owned by the City of Calgary. Our shareholder mandate is to provide stable, increasing and predictable dividends into the City of Calgary. Since the late 90s, early 2000s, we've contributed about $1.1 billion into the city. So that's kind of our role. NMAX Corporation itself is supported by 3 other corporations or business units. There's NMAX Power Corporation, which is a transmission and distribution regulated utilities company that functions in around Calgary and Alberta. Then we have Versant Power, which is located in the state of Maine in the US. Again, a transmission and distribution utilities company, regulated. And then we've got the function that I operate in, or the business unit, NMAX Energy Corporation, which is deemed as a non-regulated competitive business. We have about 1,500 megawatts of generation, 13% wind, 87% dispatchable, natural gas fired, primarily combined cycle plants. We also have some combined heat and power units as well within the city. Within NMAX Energy as well, we have a sales hedging function. So we sell energy directly into the energy market of Alberta, and we are an energy-only system here. So it's a competitive business. We don't get any money from the rate base. We basically make our funds and our revenue by selling directly into the market. Okay. So that's NMAX as a whole. Our asset management journey, I would say, formally started probably around about 2017. We have aspects of asset management for that, but we didn't really have a policy. We weren't really aligning to any particular standard or any particular philosophy. We did have a quality management system in place that aligned kind of with ISO 9001. We have other management systems within the organization, OSAS 18001, which has become ISO 45001 and ISO 45001 and ISO 14001 for the environmental standards. So we were familiar with ISO and their approach to management systems. Around about 2017, our corporate entity, NMAX Corporation, did some benchmarking across the business units. And some of the feedback that we got was, while we had a high availability and reliability on our equipment, the costs weren't the cheapest, and our processes were complex. There was a lack of clarity, and there was also definitely a siloed approach. Centers of excellence that not necessarily collaborating. So that was kind of our catalyst. Then we started looking at solutions, and obviously the asset management philosophy kind of met the bill in a lot of those areas. So that's kind of where we started. We didn't really kick it off probably until 2018, when we started forming a function asset management team within the organization, creating a NMAX policy for the business units on asset management, and then our own policy statement within NMAX Energy. And then since then, like Maria says, we've learned there's lots of stages to it, there's a lot to do, and we're probably still walking forward. So that's where we are at the moment.
Excellent, excellent. And then rounding out the pack, we have Brad Snellgrove of Ontario Power.
Hi, yeah, I'm Brad Snellgrove of Ontario Power Generation. I'm Senior Manager of Asset Management Strategy. My background is mechanical engineering. So I've been 21 years now with the company. About half that I'd say was on the thermal side at 3 of our now demolished coal stations, and the remaining 50% of that is supporting the hydro stations. So engineering roles, business programming, corporate support, You've been involved in some of the early stages of the fuel conversion. We converted one of our coal plants up in Atikokan to biomass. Also involved in some of the ISO 9001 quality management and auditing, internal auditing there, and now asset management. So OPG, obviously we're a publicly owned utility. We have 2 nuclear stations, 66 hydro stations. With that comes a lot of water management. We have a thermal side, we have an oil and gas fired, and as I mentioned, a biomass and 1 solar facility. And these are all regulated and contracted facilities. For combined cycle plants, we also own, that's part of Atura Power, which is a subsidiary of OPG. So that gives us about a total of just under 19,000 megawatts that we manage. Our asset management journey, I mean, yeah, I think to Maria's point, we had bits and pieces of what we didn't know at the time was an asset management program. We really started looking at improvements to that in 2018. When we started, my group's main focus was on the hydro assets, really to align to best practices and principles of ISO 9001, to really align with on our nuclear side, so the other business units. But on our hydro assets, we did have some solid asset management processes in place, engineering risk assessment program, plant condition assessment process. We did have some good investment management, project management processes, but we knew there was definitely some areas of improve to get a bit more, again, consistency across our hydro assets, because we were across our hydro fleet, it's 4 sub-regions, so there are differences there, and we knew there was definitely some opportunities to get a little bit better alignment across those, even within our hydro side of our business. And another big driver for us was that we knew, from speaking to other utilities, not only in Canada, that regulators are starting to get a lot more educated on ISO 55000. They're asking those questions. How are you meeting the best practices and principles of ISO 55000? So obviously that was a big driver for us. Our regulator wanted to make sure that we're making the right investment decisions on the province-owned generating assets. But yeah, I mean, we've made a lot of progress since 2018. Started off with just educating people on asset management. What does that mean? The ISO or the IAM journey video definitely utilized a lot across the company to educate staff. A big focus area for us was implementation of Copperleaf C55 to really make sure or understand the value of investments to help us set priority and and we're doing that implementation right across all business units at Ontario Power right now with an enterprise value framework. So that's a little bit about OPG and myself, and I'm looking forward to today's discussion.
Excellent. Wes?
All right, yeah, thank you, panelists, for those great introductions. It sounds like we're going to have a very good afternoon, good discussions on asset management. As you folks may have noticed, I'm one of the lucky guys who gets to make this virtual event a little more personal. I get to sit with one of the panelists here in Nova Scotia, so we're all kind of craving that personal interaction. So we feel pretty lucky that we can have Warren and I can sit in the same room. I think I'm gonna, I'll start it with kind of a foundational question. What Suzanne and I are going to do is we're going to go through a series of questions, giving each panelist time to answer. But I'm going to start with one that's kind of foundational. I think some of you maybe already touched on it already, but maybe you can elaborate a little more. So the question is, what combination of factors led to your organization to start your asset management journey? And I'd also be interested in learning a little bit of the timeline of that as well. I think you kind of touched on it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. I guess, Warren, you might as well start off.
Yep, I don't mind going first. So for Nova Scotia Power, a lot of the influencing factors around this started with a recognition that many of the systems that we had in place, such as our work management system, were starting to age and getting quite old. There was also a manifestation at the time, and I'm going back to the 2007, 2008 timeframe, where at the corporate level, at the boardroom level, it was becoming more evident through the exposure to different parts of the business as Emera grew with other affiliates being bought and sold and otherwise become part of the family, that every one of those business units was doing a different element of these different things like work planning and work management, maintenance strategy development, PMs, all these different terms that we in the maintenance world and reliability engineering world take for granted. We're starting to come to the surface at the boardroom level, and I think a lot of that was born out of people knocking on the doors and coming to sell services. For us, there was also a regulatory driver. So we are in a regulated environment in Nova Scotia Power, and our local regulator for us is the Utility Review Board, otherwise known as the UARB in a lot of circles, and the UARB, through a challenging and as they're supposed to be adversarial role, had been putting the right questions up to Nova Scotia Power and other utilities as well through the province as to how are you doing what you do, what are you doing to those pieces of equipment that you're asking ratepayers to pay for in the long term? How are you managing the pieces of equipment you have today? And another big part of that was driving it was that there was a dynamic shift in the way that we were operating our machines, people that were around to operate the machines. So a big factor for us was the attrition of people that had 25 or 35 years of experience. Walk past the machine and by ears and eyes and nose alone, tell if it was unhealthy, and it was their machine. They probably set up the maintenance practices on Excel sheets or through emails or some book in their pocket. And we recognized through the movement and transition of those people that we were going to lose a lot of the expertise how to maintain and keep those assets for the long term. So the need to drive some of the processes that are born out of ISO 55000, we actually started with PAS 55 at the time because it predated ISO 55000. And through this combination of understanding that the regulators wanted to see something a little bit differently, and that PAS 55 was around and becoming more and more present and available in the media and with salespeople knocking at the door, that there was opportunities to grow and develop this thing called asset management program. So those are some of the drivers for Nova Scotia Power that were driving us. There's a number of influences, but one of those big ones was the attrition of people. And I also have to add the way that we're running our equipment. So any of you on the call that has a utility today, especially if you're in the fossil fuel business, understands that the machines that were designed in the 50s, 60s, 70s for putting the pedal to the floor first thing in the morning, easing off a tiny bit during the beginning of the day, and then pushing it back again at night, and summer and winter, they only had a small variability in the way that we load and manage the grid. But suddenly, with the introduction of wind and other natural resources coming, other natural type systems coming online, that suddenly changed in the fossil world. So we were also seeing this massive dynamic push to manage the equipment like our larger generators in a different way than we had before. And our industry was finding that this was all new to everybody. So the need to manifest new work management plans and strategies, simple things like designing layups for generators while they're not in service, were concepts we needed to get. And asset management provided us the leverages to get there.
All right, thank you. Yeah. Maria, what factors led your organization to start?
So one of the key factors is that Manitoba Hydro is an asset-intensive company. We have $29.3 billion in assets to serve our 593,490 electricity customers and 289,364 natural gas customers. We have been managing assets for over 100 years. So Manitoba first saw electricity in 1873, and our oldest generating station is at Pointe du Bois that went into service in 1911. So we have a lot of assets, and we have a lot of aging assets. So that's another factor that compelled us on our journey. We had other factors, like Wes mentioned too, like strong encouragement from our regulator, but really asking good questions that asset management help us answer. Like the video suggests, there was top-down and bottom-up drivers for us. But I think if I were to reflect on, what pushes us forward, I would say that it's the expected benefits from robust asset management that is really propelling us forward in our journey. We recognize the value in shifting from managing assets, each in their own unique way, to asset management, which brings alignment and standardization on the balance of cost, performance, and risk. Understanding asset performance within a fleet of assets is a really powerful piece of knowledge for a utility. And to do so, you need consistent maintenance plans and data collection to help you measure the performance, cost, and risk. You need to understand your asset life cycle. You need to understand the optimized investment within that life cycle. These are all contributing factors that asset management provides for our business.
Thank you, Maria. Peter, how about you?
Hi, folks. I think I touched on it earlier on. One of the key drivers for our leadership team was benchmarking. Getting reports and having a look at or some feedback on how our businesses function, how it compares into the market. We recognized that we had new assets, some very new assets, but also some aging assets. And there was also a lack of clarity around ownership and accountability of our processes. A lack of information on business decision making, and that we were quite tactical, and we really wanted to have that strategic view. So when we started looking at ISO 55000 and the IAM structure and the Big Six, it made a lot of sense for us to switch from a kind of a very siloed approach where decisions, ideas and decisions went up and down rather than across the organization. And that's really where we've focused on moving, is that collaboration across the organization. And I think it has allowed us to provide a lot more clarity in our decision making and provide a lot more business records to support what we were doing. I think it's already been mentioned, a lot was going on in people's heads, but it's not always easy to communicate that, across the organization when it's in people's minds and heads. So we really focused on the process approach and creating business records so that we could support decisions and prove really to the City of Calgary that, we are being diligent kind of stewards of our equipment. We may have been doing it before, we were doing it before, but being able to demonstrate it was really important to us.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Paul?
Brad?
Brad.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think a lot of the key points and drivers have been mentioned. I mean, for us, is a change in role for our hydro assets. We have our Pickering station shutting down in the near future, so it'll be a lot bigger role for our hydro fleet. A big change in operations. So really wanting to ensure that reliability is there, so we're ready when needed. Aging assets. So we have a major overhaul program. It just initiated right across our hydro fleet. I think it's about $2.5 billion worth of overhaul work over the next 20 years. So that's going to touch on our stations right across the province. So, we need to make sure we're doing the right overhauls at the right time. We have the right scope. And tools like C55 will help us in making those decisions of what overhauls are complete and when. I think it was mentioned as well, the regulator was a big driver during our last nuclear audit. There was a lot of questions on asset management. So on our hydro side, obviously, we're expecting a lot of similar questions in the near future. So that was obviously a big driver for us. And yeah, I think it was also mention of that knowledge base, that the staff retirements, that was obviously a big driver in us trying to get the tools in place to really have knowledge on our assets, document information on our assets. So again, to help us move us towards risk-based decisions. So again, a lot of similar drivers as the other utilities mentioned.
Excellent.
Yeah, thank you. Very good.
So utilities are quite complex organizations with multiple business lines, as you have all mentioned. That's true of all of your companies. How actually, a lot of you mentioned collaboration as well, but how actually have you been able to get all those various functional groups on board and really integrate the efforts of groups such as maintenance, engineering, finance with what's happening in asset management? How were you able to do that? And Brad, as you were on the floor, we'll just pick up back with you again.
Yeah, I mean, for us, we recently went through a major reorg, and it's really a move towards more of an enterprise approach, so that we have that ownership and oversight to ensure that consistency across the company with regards to an asset management program. But I think a big part of it is the leadership commitment. As James mentioned earlier, walk the talk, right? Everyone has to be speaking the same language, educating people on ISO 55000, what are the benefits of it, involving those people early in the process, whether it's finance, engineering. You want to make sure those key stakeholders are involved right from the get-go, and understand the changes that are coming forward, but as well as the benefits that will come out of that. You need to make sure they're involved at the beginning to really, voice their input and be part of building the tool, configuring a tool, for example, like equipment reliability tool. We're now in the early stages of implementation. But I think another part of it is, looking for those opportunities to remove unnecessary process or governance that's in place. And I think, when you start, educating people on the push to asset management and getting a bit more consistency and involvement up front, it's really gone a long way in that collaboration. Again, I think leadership commitment has been a key part of it so far. So yeah, I think, in summary, involving the right people right at the start has definitely helped us.
Excellent. Maria?
You're mixing it up, Suzanne. Okay. Thought Peter was going next. All good. So, I think I do want to echo what Brad said about leadership commitment. I think we've recently reorganized as well. And interestingly, we were functionally organized, right? So we were functionally organized into distribution, transmission, and generation. And within those groups, there was the generation maintenance group and the generation engineering group. And so one of the things that we've just recently done is pull together to bring all the maintenance groups together, all the engineering groups together, and all the asset management groups together. Part of the success is training as well and education, right? So we've been putting through not only our asset management leaders, but also our maintenance people, our engineering groups, our operations group, and we've gotten our finance groups involved in the training as well to increase the education. I think our key challenge is alignment across our energy delivery assets. Manitoba Hydro has been functionally organized. That is gas with gas, generation with generation, transmission with transmission, and distribution with distribution, telecommunications, and buildings with building services, right? So each category of assets developed its own way of managing those assets. We have separate portfolio budgets for each function. We have multiple computerized maintenance management systems, which is really hard to sustain from an IT perspective. It's really hard to understand the risk that we're taking across all these assets, given that the data is in different CMMSs and it's collected at various levels. Are we spending the right money and on the assets that need it? Are we spending it? Is it optimized across the supply chain? I can tell you that we are spending money on transmission where transmission needs it most. Is the first dollar in transmission more or less important than the first dollar I spend in generation? What about the last dollar? These are questions that are really fueling our asset management maturity. It is a fundamental shift in people, process, and technology to find alignment in the whole life cycle, from capital purchase, maintenance operations, and disposal on the balance of cost, performance, and risk. And as we face these challenges and implement the needed change in people, process, and technology, it's important to remember why we're working so hard on this change. We are facing these key challenges to optimize the whole supply chain of electrons, from generation to where our customer flicks on the light. We're optimizing the supply chain that we control for gas right up to the customer's thermostat.
Peter? Thank you, Maria. Peter?
Okay, thank you, Suzanne. Yeah, so I don't want to echo all the things that Brad and Maria said, but I totally agree with the leadership aspect. Needs to come from the top. What do they say? What interests my boss fascinates me. So we do need it to come, down the line. And the leadership team need to show interest and value and commitment and investment. So that is key. But it's the vertical frameworks are somewhat easy if you get the right leadership and they communicate appropriately. It's the cross collaboration that has been a challenge. I also echo that the education and training piece. It's key. People need to understand what we're trying to do and what it really means, asset management. One of the things that we really focused on, we didn't tell our organisation this. They're probably watching now, figuring it out, but we focused on total quality management. We took that philosophy because it's kind of behavior-based approach to quality, and it really focuses on the bigger picture, the holistic view of the organization, and aligning with the organizational goals. How do we all fit in to the value stream? How do we my function? And it also focuses on focuses on customer vendor relationships. So it starts off by who's providing you with what? Who's providing you with information, decisions, material? Okay, then you add value-adding activities. Okay, you need to define those as a functional leader. Okay, and then you've got outputs. Who's your customer? And I think a lot of people focus on customer as the external customer. And in this case, I think you need to focus on both. So who within the organization are you communicating your outputs from your processes or your program? So we didn't really talk about total quality management because I think buzzwords turn people off, but that's a philosophy that we approached it on. And we started off by creating some fairly high level business process models and functional relationship models. So instead of just having an org structure that's got lists of names and titles, we really tried to link that to how do the functions of the organization interrelate to contribute to the value stream, and it shows the overall customer vendor relationships from a high level. So we started, I think there was a lot of feeling in the plants with the end user and the end customer, but when we actually start adding in trading into the mix, actually our plants are there to support the trading needs and the business plan. Okay, so it added a lot of perspective to where we sit within the organization and how we contribute, and that we should all be thinking about who's providing me what and who are my customers, and am I providing what my customers need on a timely basis in the right format and that sort of thing. And then just recapping that business process models, very high level, quite simple, but showed how we interrelate. So that was how we approached it.
Excellent. And Warren.
So being last on the panelists makes answering the questions easy because I just defer to everybody else. They're all so similar. One note I want to make is that I notice many of us have already said, us included, on the panel here have talked about recent transformations in the business. And of Nova Scotia Power has done the same. So we started out as the AMO, Asset Management Office. I mentioned very early on a few people, and we have recently built the functional elements of our business together under enterprise asset management. And it's interesting to see that we're all following a very similar trend. And as I mentioned earlier, in 20 years that I've been exposed to this kind of parts of the business, I'm seeing this trend increase amongst utilities. So I just wanted to make a note of that. That struck me. You only see that kind of thing in these kind of forums. So thanks for those answers. So for us, really it starts with being a good salesperson. And we needed to introduce asset management to our business very carefully and very cautiously. And a lot of that has to do with the question, how do you break down those silos? So those silos that we're all aware of and that were shown in the beginning of our session here today, you need to be cognizant of what kind of change management is required around that. So we thought about that, we discussed that. We created different tactics and approaches depending on what part of the business we need to lean into. So one of the first places we started was gutting and rebuilding our work management plan system. So we had an opportunity to throw out our CMS program for our generation side of our business and start anew. We actually ended up with the same company, but we went out for our regulated business and did all that kind of work. And by starting there at some of the basics like management, we were able to bring people from all of the power plants together that had a stake in that interest. So using the best parts of change management as well as selling things, start off at the base of what you need to do to develop asset management programs. And we had developed this based into what we call pyramid. And some of you actually see me present this, or my former boss, Rob McNeil, present this from Nova Scotia Power. And it represents all of the different building blocks you need, starting with your work management processes to inspection and test programs, to your PDM programs, to your technologies. And each of those becomes a chapter in the book for a playbook, if you will, for asset management. So we created those fundamental sections first and sold each one to the stakeholders within the business that we needed support from. And in some cases, we had to be stealthy. We had to be careful because of those silos. They were proud of what they did. They were the best of what they did, but they were one plant out of the 5 or 6 plus the other parts of our business that needed to play along. How do you get those folks to play along? So change management played a big part in that. So some areas of business we started at the top. We started with a plant manager and worked our way down. Some parts of the business we started with the technicians on the floor and worked our way up. So it all depended on which element of the asset management playbook, that pyramid, those fundamentals. I wish I had the diagram in front of me to show you what I mean, but which part of the business required that, and we would be very selective over how we did that. And we started with the principles of change management, and then we would sell what we were doing, and then to the higher levels, the leadership support, we managed to get that on board very early by selling the best and demonstrating the best results of what we had. So if we had early wins, low-hanging fruit, we grabbed all of those and we very quickly pushed them up the ladder to demonstrate that we were making a benefit to the business. And what we found is very naturally a lot of change came along with it as leaders adopted this new philosophy, this new vocabulary, these ideas of asset management. They were pulled in by it because they were being sold through a bunch of us being able to demonstrate how effective these programs were. If we do a vibration monitoring program, we might be able to pick up a failure before it comes to failure. And we can sell that because we did that. So we did that over and over again with many different aspects of asset management reliability. And that's what worked. It was a stealthy, carefully thought of approach in different parts of our business. And now what's happened after 12 years of doing this is other parts of the business that we did not feel or did not bring into or didn't even exist at the time, the asset management role, parts outside of us like our capital planning group and the capital projects group working on specific refurbishments in our hydro system right now. They're actually coming to us. So we had a meeting last week for the first time. They reached out to asset management and said, when we turn this project over to you, what is it that you guys need? We said, thanks for joining the club. So this is what's happened. So some of it, 99.9% of it has been pushing into the business. We've become a freight train in some cases. In other cases, we've been a stealth fighter. And then on that last 0.1% where we are today, they're coming to us because we have already been able to sell and migrate the program to a maturity level where it's expected in our.
Very nice. Wes?
So yeah, thank you, Warren. So a few of you have kind of alluded to work management systems, EMS systems, that sort of thing, and we've had a few questions from the audience around that. So I think what I'd like to do is just hear each of your thoughts, maybe on the details of what CMMS you use, and how it helps drive those asset management decisions, and how you link that to your other the other aspects of asset management. Maria, why don't you start this time? We'll really change it up again on you.
Hey, all good. So I'm really smiling at this question because we have 7 maintenance management systems at Manitoba Hydro, and this is part of the problem with our former functional organization, and the CMMSs don't speak to each other, and there's all sorts of problems. So we understand that we need to move towards a smaller number of CMMSs. So we have a couple of the SAP solutions. We have SAP PM, and we have another one called DMPS, which is just another instance of SAP PM. We have a TGIS, we have a distribution GIS, which is used as a maintenance management system. We have our own internal software called RMS that was done for the AC station assets. We have Banner, we have Remedy. So like I said, we have lots, and we understand that one of our big challenges going forward is going to be alignment in CMMS.
Brad?
So our work management system is Asset Suite 7. We're actually going through implementation of Asset Suite 9 soon. So we only have one system in place. So that definitely on our nuclear side, that includes a lot of our asset information. We are also in the process for implementation of an equipment reliability tool. So this will have a lot more detail on the assets. So feed-ins from our M&D center, feed-ins from our operator and maintenance and engineering observations to really keep the finger on the pulse and the condition of our assets. So we are early stages now of adopting equipment reliability tool, but in the end, that'll house, condition of our assets, our engineering risk register, and then from that identify, what are the mitigations necessary, whether it's, maintenance, change in maintenance, or the need for an investment that would then push into C55 from an asset investment planning and management tool perspective.
Thanks. Warren, how about you? I won't make you go last.
Thanks. So for Nova Scotia Power, we have, I think at last count, 3.5 CMMSs. We have GIS in place there on our transmission distribution side. We have Maximo on our transmission distribution side, and we have a product called Recline, which is owned by a company called Megamation. They started in the hospital industry in the generation side, and our hydro side as well. And that particular company, Megamation, has actually had some form of a CMS program with Nova Scotia Power since the 90s. In fact, it was a cost-based program back then. And if you recall some of the drivers behind, or some of the elements where we started with our CMS program and work management program, was one of the first we were able to dust and change out. And we went shopping, and Maximo didn't fit the bill. Maximo had a lot of really good elements in it, but folks at Megamation were willing to do things that are more effective and more added value through things like the support network, which was local to us here in Halifax, which was important because we had a lot of things we wanted to design in our CMMS that were appropriate to Nova Scotia Power, not spend 6 months with a software company trying to get them to make us fit into their blocks. And Megamation was able to provide that product. So that was a big driver for us in CMS, was the ability to tell them what we needed and have them turn around what we require very quickly. So we still, even to this day, after working with them for so long, at the best value, the best cost for Nova Scotia Power, they still turn around requests for us within a couple of days. And we also found that we wanted the systems to be open enough that they could integrate with other systems without a lot of challenges. So it was important for us. We knew there would be a lot more software, a lot more enterprise level systems that we want to get information from. I think it was mentioned by James, data becomes king in these kind of situations with asset management, and data movement between those systems is very important. So our CMMS software had to meet the bill of being open enough that we could drop data into it from other places. And our enterprise asset management program, our enterprise, or APM, is actually GE. So we have GE APM as well, but it does not function as a CMMS program. So we live with Direct Line as our primary driver. Maximo is another big part of our business on the transmission distribution side. We have decided to leave that argument alone and well, at one point talk to each other. At this stage, we have those two as the primary one.
All right, thanks, Warren. It was Peter.
We do have Maximo, just one system as our enterprise asset management system. We've used it a lot actually and adapted it quite a lot. So we have our CMMS in there, we have our inventory in there. We've adapted it for a corrective action program as well. So all our unplanned events and conditions get put into Maximo and then go through a workflow process to resolve, and then we trend the results. We've also interfaced it with a number of items as well. So we actually have implemented ARMS reliability, 1PM optimization software for asset strategies, PM optimization, and also our risk program. So anything that we do pull now needs to really interface with Maximo. Maximo is our key pillar in this respect. And once we actually get into capital investments and projects, we use Copperleaf as well. But we found Maximo very successful for us in the early stages. We kind of blazed the trail in NMAX Energy, and I know it's been adopted across NMAX as a whole now. The only problem with that is the resources get taken for other areas of the business. So, you know, you suffer from the success, I guess, in a little way. But no, we found it adaptable, and it is the key for us. And I know my reliability lead, Tom, is like, if there's 9 Maximo, it doesn't exist. We're just not, we're not functioning with it. So, you know, we really push that. But that's where we are with it.
Thank you. Suzanne?
All right, and we have a question from the audience. What are some of the early customer benefits that were realized as you all began to implement your asset management journeys? And let's start with Warren.
That's a great question. So philosophically, when you try to answer that kind of question, and I think everybody who's been in this business for a while understands this, I have picked up a program where I'm able to detect a failure early on a machine, and I've been able to prevent that machine from failing catastrophically. So now I can say I saved the company $5 million because I saved that turbine from dying in the middle of the night. And that's what a lot of salespeople will tell you when they come in and sell you these magic monitoring systems. I can save you $5 million and your customer $5 million. So it's really hard to say that if I wasn't using this program and then an operator happened to come by or a DCS switch tripped the unit off right before their failure occurred, that you could make the argument that really I didn't save $5 million. All I did was stop the machine early. And whether or not I'm actually saving $5 million, I can't put that into the bank. I can't write a check for $5 million on something that I prevented happening without knowing that I actually prevented that from happening. So understanding the probability is very difficult, and understanding the benefit to the customer and making that match is very difficult. And we struggle with that still today because our executives, people that sign the checks, they want to see the money in what we're saving with reliability and asset management programs. And I'm yet to find a good formula for that. And I've been doing this for 20 years. If you guys have one, please give me one, because it's been a difficult way to understand it. So what we do is we try to put it into different terms. What we save for the customer, there are some things that you can absolutely match on, saying safety, health, and environment, for example. If we can prevent an environmental spill by doing a robust risk-based inspection program in our asset management suite of tools and technologies, that's something we can count on. If we can demonstrate that we have detected all of these failures early and all of these failures have led to an increased uptime, we can do that. But we can't assign a probability to it. But what we can do is sell those saves. We can say we've saved this equipment from a more catastrophic failure later on. We don't know what that would have cost, because it could be anything from a torn shaft on a motor to a complete destruction of an armature in that same motor. And you don't know which of those two things is going to happen when you detect that it might be a bearing that's starting to fail. So I'm waffling a little bit, but it's a hard thing to answer, and I'm hesitant to answer it. But the public expects our ratepayers expect some benefit for the investment in these programs, because it does cost money to run these programs. So what we do is we translate that translate that language into, here's what we saved with this program, here's what we saved with that program. It's not necessarily dollars. It's not necessarily quantified. It could be qualifiable statements. We have a lot of those. But there are things that we see that have changed in our program, such as our DAF work. So our outage numbers, the percentage of time that our units are offline, has been dropping in the last 10 years or so since the program came alive. But is that a direct effect of all the programs we put in, or is it the adoption of the philosophies in reliability and asset management within our program that have benefited that? DAF numbers can actually be translated into fuel numbers, which can be put as savings, but we have to be very careful about how we talk about that in the regulated industry, because we're not allowed to tell people how much we've saved in fuel because of the fuel adjustment mechanisms that are put in place. We can't put the check or the money bags in front of these reliability and asset management saves. Very difficult question. It's a very good question, but I've been struggling to answer that from the beginning of my career.
All right, then let's go to Peter.
Again, I agree. Sometimes it's challenging. I think where we've managed to quantify some of these inventory savings and reorder numbers and points, where we've optimized our PMs for the risks based on failure modes, based on our operating context. We've been able to optimize some of our inventories, but we have to be very careful, because our plant managers are the people that are managing the risk to levels of service, so we can't force that situation. What we will do is make recommendations and take them to the plant managers and allow them to make those decisions. So we will map proposed optimizations against actual optimizations accepted. So that's one thing. I think where we've seen a lot of improvement, though, is in collaboration and decision making. We would often see, we would see a commercial decision to run our equipment in a different context to make more revenue, make more commodity margin, and it would run up the chain to the senior leadership team. When you put dollars in front of a senior leader, it's difficult for them to resist, and then down it comes again, and suddenly we're changing our operating context, which means we're consuming life quicker. And then suddenly our maintenance and our supply chain and our planning department are all out of kilter because we've consumed life quicker than we anticipated. Sometimes that was identified, sometimes it's not. So what we've seen is collaboration between multiple teams. We've seen a commercial analytics director bringing in the plant manager, reliability, engineering, maintenance, and discussing operational context changes, which then allows you to manage risk on the front end. Instead of running a gas turbine from a standing start at -30 degrees C to 760 degrees C in 8 minutes and expecting it to live for a long time, okay, we've modified that front end risk management by having some mechanical sympathy, injected from our reliability teams and our maintenance and plant managers. So we kind of manage that on the front end with being able to still try and achieve the maintenance window on the back end. So it takes a bit of getting there, but I think seeing that collaboration across different departments is huge. And I think that's when we see we're winning. If people say, show me the dollars, sometimes it's challenging, there's no doubt about it. But when you see that collaboration and decisions not being made in isolation and not consuming life of equipment and then putting a whole load of other people under pressure, because the plan has changed. Okay, I think that's really important. But again, it's subjective. You have to describe it to people. You have to tell people about it and communicate. And that's not always enough. You know, people want dollars for sure. Where we've actually done it is optimizing RPMs, optimize our inventory, proposed optimizations against actual accepted ones, and we've fed those in. Okay,
Yeah.
so, but that's how we've done the money side.
Beautiful. How about your side, Brad?
I don't have a whole lot to add here. I mean, you know, we're on our hydro side, we're still kind of on that journey of implementation of some of the tools. I know in the beginning, you know, trying to develop a cost benefit of implementing C55 or implementing an equipment reliability was definitely a challenge. On our nuclear end, we definitely have a lot more monitoring in place to really, you know, I guess have those interventions early on before you have a failure, so you can have a, you know, a direct correlation between that earlier alert and you know, preventing a forced outage. Yeah, on our hydro fleet, we're still in the process of identifying, you know, where we want to put condition monitoring on what equipment, you know, and that differs dependent on the size of the station, the role of the station. So I think we're a little bit a ways until we can really provide that type of information on the cost savings. You know, even on the KPIs, development of our asset management KPIs was the, you know, and really trying to get that solid link between the implementation of this tool, you know, saved us those amount of dollars. I think we're not mature enough at this point to really provide that, but I'm sure it'll be questions that come down the line as we move forward in a few years' time.
Excellent. Over to you, Wes.
Yeah, thanks, Suzanne. I got another audience question, actually. I thought it was a good one. So the question is, how do you characterize risk and uncertainty in capital planning? And I know a couple of you have kind of mentioned capital planning, so I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that. Brad, might as well start with you, I guess.
As I mentioned earlier, we're in the process now of adopting or implementing Copperleaf C55 to help with both capital investment decision making and our non-standard. So part of that was the development of an enterprise value framework to make sure that right across the organization we are valuing investments consistently. Safety, environment, social license, loss generation, financial risk, dam safety, public safety. A lot of those value models is what we're utilizing today. So that's you know, our plan going forward. At each region, we do have a kind of business programming group that has been in place for some time now to really look at the investments and you know. But I think the implementation of C55 will make that a lot more consistent because, you know, before that it was more of a sub-regional silo assessment, and I think, you know, having the value framework implemented and utilizing that in C55 will definitely increase our consistency and transparency on what capital investments to do and when to do them.
Okay, good, thank you. Peter?
So I think your capital spend is going to come from a couple of different sources. It may come from like a renewal program that's already based in Maximo and set up maybe as a PM for people to challenge. So we would challenge that capital spend right up front and risk rank it. And the first thing you probably need to make sure you've got, we didn't have this, was a uniform risk evaluation matrix or criteria. We had several to start with, and we created a uniform one, got it signed off by a leadership team, so it became a kind of an official document. So if it comes out of Maximo or IBM Maximo as a kind of scheduled renewal or something along those lines, we would, long before it got to planning and, you know, and actually needing the money, we would challenge it. And what we'd say is, you know, what's the risk it's proposing to our levels of service? So what's the likelihood and consequence? And then we would take it from there. But we also have a risk management program, an operational one, where risks are kind of thrown into the register by anybody that sees a risk. Now, they're primarily owned by the plant managers, and they would be the sponsor of the risk. And then our asset management team facilitates the evaluation of that risk. And then from there, it isn't always a capital program or project. It might be substitution, elimination, the hierarchy of controls, but sometimes it does become a capital project, and that's when we would kind of feed it into C55 for evaluation as well. So that's kind of how we deal with it.
Yeah, thank you. Maria?
Yeah, so I'm not going to repeat what Brad and Peter have said about C55. It provides a really good framework on a whole bunch of different risks. And I think the other piece too is that any issue that you have, any problem that you're trying to solve and you're trying to solve through investment, you have alternatives to solve that. And I had a former supervisor who used to say, if you're having a problem with vehicle accidents in your business, I mean, one solution is take everyone keys away, but then you're not actually going to get the business done, right? So part of what I really value about C55 is that you can now look that there is probably 5 different ways to solve a problem. What is going to give you that optimal value over the life cycle of that asset? And I think it's really helpful to be able to compare, because some will address certain risks better than others. And so it's a decision support tool that helps you quantify and qualify the risks, and especially across your solutions that you're evaluating.
Great. Warren?
So I'm starting to feel a little bit left behind with all this talk about C55. And Bodwin, if you're still there, yeah, give me a call. You've got my number. It's been about 8 years. Maybe we should try again. You guys are, the way that you guys have described it is exactly the way that we're doing it. Although our tools, I think, are definitely an area for continuous improvement. And we are too, as well as I think you mentioned it, Peter, is that we are lacking a uniform approach to risk, to the risk identification that leads to the ability to determine which of those projects is going to stack up against the other ones and who's going to come up on top. What we do is that we have, and it's been a very successful model for us, is we built reliability teams within our fleet. So for the rotating equipment, for example, I lead the rotating equipment reliability team, and we do assessments usually in the early part of the year before the capital planning is building on for the next year. And we have a set of criteria that we risk rank the different major asset classes that we're looking at, such as motors and fans and water feed pumps and circulating water pumps and things like that. Our electrical reliability team does the same thing, and they're broken up into major asset classes, and they do some risk ranking on those pieces of equipment, controls as well, and even so much into the civil side, boilers, heat exchangers. We kind of have broken up into these different reliability teams. A lot of people share seats on both a number of teams, but those risk ranking exercises that we try to do in the beginning of the year is what leads to the assigned capital project for the following year, or within this current year if we're experiencing something that could be unplanned and unforeseen. But into the next year, the planning is based on the risk modeling. Interestingly enough, it used to be plant by plant by plant, at least on the generation side, who determined how they would do it. And sitting as a capital engineer when I was 13 or 14 years ago, we'd sit in a room and whoever had the loudest voice would get the capital money for that particular project. So we've shifted with the asset management models and reliability, and using risk profiling, we introduced the risk matrix, a simple 5x5 matrix with condition and probability as two primary factors, to present to our regulator those projects which were going to be above a certain threshold that they had to see. After some time, and they got used to that, now it's become an expectation. So our regulator has demanded, if they don't see a risk profile done on a piece of equipment, on the capital project, I should say, that capital project might be rejected because they might think that we haven't put enough thought into how it stacks up against the rest of our projects we're putting forth every year. So that's an interesting method. Our methodology, I think, is the same amongst us. It's both risk identification and risk management, just different tools to do it. Ours could be cleaner, they could be better, but that's what our business of continuous improvement is all about.
Yeah, thanks, Warren. Suzanne?
All right, and we have another question from the audience. A number of speakers have mentioned work management. I take this as including things like managing job plans, worker productivity, etc. Do the panelists consider that work management is a part of asset management in their organizations, or do they think it is outside the purview of asset management? And let's start with Maria.
So it's an interesting question. I think it's up to asset management to define what are the maintenance plans that are going to deliver that balance of cost, performance, and risk. And then the work management system that goes out and assigns that work to the workers, perhaps is outside of asset management. You can see that asset management has a huge contributing factor because it's going to define the work that needs to be done. And it's going to define how that work needs to be done in terms of developing the maintenance procedures, the task templates, the intervals, all that sort of thing. The work management system also then has to house all the data that's required for asset management to be able to make the data-driven decisions. So I don't know that I can answer yes or no, inside or outside. It definitely is a collaboration, and it is two different groups within Manitoba Hydro. Like work management is in operations, whereas asset management is in asset planning and delivery. So there is a difference, but I think at the end of the day, we all have to work together to keep the lights on for our customers.
All right, thank you. Brad?
Yeah, I mean, we started, I guess, back in 2018, we started the journey. We took our IAM, the IAM asset management conceptual model, and really started applying that to our organization. What are the programs in place, the roles and accountabilities, and we view, work management definitely part of the asset management life cycle. I mean, it's, you got things like C55 that looks at the investment side of things to mitigate risk. Well, your work management is, your maintenance side to again, mitigate risk and maintain reliability. So we definitely view it as part of that asset management process for sure.
Okay, Peter?
This is interesting. So I probably offload my responsibilities here, but I don't care how you do it. I care that it interfaces with other aspects of the business and it delivers the needs that it delivers. I don't care who picks it. I don't care who manages it. I just need to know that it's there, it functions, and it interfaces. It's as simple as that. It's not my role as the asset management leader to come and tell you how your work management system should function. I would say it's a central pillar to any lifecycle management, approach. But it's not for me to own, and it's not for me to tell you how it should work. But I do need minimum requirements. That's how I would approach it.
Warren?
So we, I like the way you put that. It's very interesting. Our philosophy is that we would like to own it so that we could manage those interfaces appropriately. If I could see all 100 or 120 of you on the screen right now and ask you how many of you struggle with good work order history, I bet you I would see a lot of hands up in the air. But work order history is critically important to what I do when I'm doing an investigation on a root cause analysis, for example. If I'm doing an RCM analysis, I need that work order history to be there. There are elements, like you say, Peter, that need to be well integrated with our system. Is that best managed by the asset management group, or is it best owned by an operations or maintenance group? I think, just listening to the answers here today, I don't think we've got a good answer on that. For us in Nova Scotia Power, for us, we tried to adopt the majority of that, and it didn't work out. And other parts of our business pushed back and said, no, we're going to manage this. And for good or bad, it's still in that position today, where it's never had clear ownership on whether it's an operating function or an asset management function. But it definitely has elements within it that are important to every one of those pieces, even if sometimes they don't see it that way.
All right. Wes?
Yeah, thanks, Suzanne. So I think I'm going to change gears a little bit here. I want to talk about ISO 55000 certification. I guess I'd like to hear from the panelists what your thoughts are on ISO 55000 certification, whether you're headed in that direction or whether you're aligned with that currently. Just general thoughts on it. Warren, go ahead.
So at Nova Scotia Power, what we adopted in the very early days was PAS 55, a few years in advance of ISO 5000 coming out. Knowing that it was a well-recognized document in other parts of the world, and that what they prescribed was actually beneficial to utilities and built for utilities. So for us, it made more sense than ISO 9001 or another ISO standard that we could adopt as a management philosophy. But when we knew that we were going to use this PAS 55, we were not obligated to adopt it as something we had to oblige ourselves to. When ISO 55000 came along, we said the same thing. Many organizations, us included, when you put those three letters ISO in front of anything, you start getting terrified because the amount of effort and work that's required to manage those systems for compliance reasons almost takes another division or at least a couple of people almost full time to take care of. And we all see that with our governance requirements around NERC. For example, those of us that are engaged with NERC, it requires a full-time role. Management of those kind of programs like ISO 55000 also require a lot of resources. We were not ready to get ourselves into that position. We're still not today. We like to say that we are in line with ISO 55000 and PAS 55, and indeed, many of our programs were designed around the tenets of ISO 55000. And today, I would challenge us to do surveys. In fact, Wesley and I have done surveys with Power to see how we align and what gaps we have between things like ISO 55000. So we've used it very intelligently, I think, but we didn't want to be compliant to it because the requirements around managing that compliance through time is quite high, and it comes at a price that we're not willing to pay.
Maria?
So similar to Warren, Manitoba Hydro is setting up to align with the ISO 55001. We definitely see value in the framework. It makes a lot of sense. At this time, we're not pursuing certification. And the question is why? Well, Manitoba Hydro needs to focus on asset management maturity. And that's the step we need to focus on right now. And that's where we're turning our attention to.
Good. Brad?
Yeah, similar to both Warren and Maria. OPG at this point, we're not planning to become certified in ISO 55000. I know a few of our thermal stations were ISO 9000 certified. A lot of work. I was part of a group that just managed that in itself. So I think at this point, unless we're driven there by our regulator, we do not have plans to become certified. We are running staff, a large number of staff, through the ISO 55000 training. It is actually the same certification training, but again, it's just to bring that awareness to staff. But yeah, no plans for certification.
And what about you, Peter?
So similar case, we are aligning or attempting to align with ISO 55000, and that's our mandate. Our policy, actually, our corporate policy says that we will align to that standard, but there's no appetite to get certified. And I think that's okay, personally, as long as you don't cherry pick. And some organizations pick the pieces they like and the pieces they don't like, and then I don't think it functions correctly. So if you're really committed to the philosophy of asset management, implement ISO 55000. It doesn't matter whether you're certified or not, but don't cherry pick, because all you'll end up with is a badge and not a functioning system.
Just wanted to add one more thing. We're members of the CIADI Asset Management Interest Group, and they sent out a similar survey asking a similar question around certification, and I'd guess about 95% of the responders said they weren't becoming or getting that certification as well. So seems to be, I guess, the norm right across various industries.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you. Suzanne?
All right, it does seem as if the focus is on asset management maturity, which is a good thing. And so we are now headed to our cool down question based on where we are at with time. And this one comes from our audience. So we're going to take quick answers, I think. What in your opinion, is the critical first step in seeking that alignment and sustaining commitment to the implementation of asset management? And let's start with Warren. Take a quick swallow, Warren.
Sell it. Sell it up first. You need to be at the board of directors. You need to be at your executive leadership level. You need to be talking to your C-suite, and you need to sell it the idea first, because it's an investment and people don't often realize how big that investment is. And make sure they understand it is not a software solution. It doesn't exist.
That's a good one. Get that one all the time. Peter.
Exactly the same. You got to sell it to the C-suite. They got to be committed, but they got to understand what it is, for sure. That it's a way of life and it's not a project, and it's going to be our way of life for the long term. And then I'd say if you get the approval, you need to communicate it well down through the organisations and the reasons why. And then I would say start with a maturity assessment of where you are. Use the IAM tool to understand where you are, and then communicate that to the leadership team what this is going to take. That'd be my thoughts.
All right, Maria.
Other than saying ditto, but yeah, you need leadership commitment. It is a journey. It is a journey in people, process, and technology, and it takes time. And so you need to have that leadership commitment and then the leadership modeling of the asset management way.
Excellent. Brad?
Yeah, I mean, same thing. I think, we started as an asset management initiative, but shortly into that, we realized this can't be an initiative. This got to be a permanent part of the organization. And last year, we did come. We now have an enterprise asset management organization. So yeah, I think that said a lot around leadership and the value they saw in having that asset management organization. But to Peter's point as well, the maturity assessment. I mean, when you think of the world of asset management, where do you start? And we did a maturity assessment utilizing a consultant. And before that, the day before that, we ran our leadership team and a lot of those stakeholders involved in the day-to-day around asset management through ISO 55000 training. So we did that, and then the next day went right into a maturity assessment to outline kind of our short, medium, long-term goals. So yeah, I think it went a long ways, because then you have that document or that report to really look at, what are our gaps and how can we set priority going forward.
Excellent. Wes, it seems we have time for one more cool down question.
Yeah, I was going to say, Suzanne, I think we have time for another question. Let's say an easy one here. If you guys were to go back to the beginning of your asset management journey, what would you do different, if anything? Peter, start us off.
So I think in our case, I would say make sure your communications align with your actions. So we obviously got our C-suite on board. They were communicating that asset management was a holistic approach to life and life cycle management, but it involved process mapping and collaboration across the organization, like ISO 55000 says. It's to coordinate activities of the whole organization rather than just the front-facing asset touching kind of elements. So we were communicating that message, but we did our maturity assessment. We too went out to a organization, Jacobs, and they helped us with a maturity assessment. And then what a lot of it said is we don't have any asset management structure in place, which is kind of what we expected. So we focused on that. We built our plan from that maturity assessment, and it focused on initially in the first years, and it was a multi-year plan. It talked about implement a risk management, improving asset management, asset information, and taking our reliability function from a reactive approach to a proactive approach. Okay, I think plants call it ambulance chasing. So we wanted to change it from ambulance chasing to, actually a risk-based kind of forward-looking approach. But that translated into the next couple of years of work at the plants, asset information collecting, risk management kind of facilitation meetings at the plants, and taking a lot of their time and effort. And then probably what that translated into is we were communicating holistic physical asset management across the organization, but we were doing all our work at the plants, and they felt that reliability engineering was asset management. And it's been sometimes difficult to break that connection. So if I was going to do it again quickly, I would make sure I went and process mapped and worked with our commercial teams so that we could show that we were balancing our approach across the organization and not just focusing on the people that touch the assets.
Excellent. Yeah, very good. Brad, how about you?
I think, Peter mentioned about communication. I think generally we did a good job in involving the right people throughout the process. But I think, looking back at it now, maybe developing a formal change management plan. We have a change management group. Well, we do now, but I think if we had to involve them a little sooner, I think it may have address some of the challenges, engagement challenges we had in the beginning. Also, we found, and it was lessons that you learn along the way, the need for steering committees. We even on the C55 front, we start with a pilot. You make the assumption that your representatives from across the organization are reporting back to their teams and managers on how things are going. Not always the case. So I think implementing steering committees is a very important part of it. And again, it goes to that need for leadership commitment. I think on the implementation of new tools, I think maybe more of a staged approach. We're looking at asset management, and here's the tools out there, and trying to really do bite off sometimes more than you can chew, and a lot of the similar stakeholders that you want involved are on those multiple teams and stretched thin. So I think, just a bit more of a staggered approach probably to adopting some of these new tools and processes if we started over again.
Warren?
I would do it exactly the same way I did it before.
I know that's not true.
Oh, that's not true. We did. I hear a lot of what the other panelists said. I agree, especially process mapping. We did a lot of that in the early days, but there was a lot more that we didn't know because we were so far behind where we wanted to be. And we were in a rush and a scramble in the beginning to get to where we wanted to be, and that we weren't able to slow ourselves down enough to do exactly those kind of things, like really good, elaborate process mapping that will enable us to facilitate good change management. And we did good change management in a few areas, but not others. Also, if I had to go back to day one and my boss asked me, hey, Warren, what do you think about the first thing we should do with asset management? Say, get me as many trainers as you can, as many courses as you can, and we'll start training the folks at the bottom and the top at the same time. And eventually we're going to, I'm backwards here, but we're going to converge in the middle. And that would be training at the level of what the particular user of asset management programs or inputter or outputter of asset management programs and reliability tools needed to know. So what does a technician on the floor need to know is much different than what an executive needs to know. The technician on the floor doesn't need to know everything about ISO 55000, but they have to know how entering correct work order history facilitates RCAs, which impact investments and decisions on equipment in the future. So training packages developed and customized and delivered at the top level and lower level, delivered at the same time as we're evolving the program, I think is where I would start from if you asked me to start again.
Yeah, thank you. Maria?
What would I do differently? Easy. I would have started on the path we're on now earlier. I think about that song, Bless the Broken Road That Led Me Straight to You. Our road was not straight and was certainly a little broken along the way, but we're on the road we need to be on. Early on, when we were still in our functional organization, we recognized we didn't have the asset management expertise to embark on the journey, and we brought in various experts to craft our journey. And part of it as an organization, you got to know what you know and know what you don't know. And so similar to what Warren said, you got to bring trainers in to train on asset management, so at least we're all speaking the same language. The company we hired to train also helped us build our strategic asset management plan. And they've helped to embed this new way of thinking throughout the corporation. They've helped us build a framework in developing asset class strategies that are consistent across the organization. And they were key in developing the piece of the people, process, and technology, the process piece of the people, process, and technology triangle. So the next piece was about our business reorganization. So Manitoba Hydro, not surprising, is not great in business reorganization. So we brought in Deloitte Consultants to help with our business model transformation so that we can be organized to deliver on the asset management mandate. We've implemented 5 levels of reorganization and we have 2 levels left. So we have the people side in pretty good shape and our road is looking clear. And now we're working on the technology side. So we've talked about leveraging C55 tool across our energy streams, and we really need to find alignment in our work management side. This asset management road is fascinating and one that provides us an awesome opportunity to continuously learn and improve the life cycle delivery of our assets.
Thank you, Maria. That's great. Suzanne, I think we probably have time for a speed round.
I would say let's do a speed round. You're not getting away, Warren. Gonna keep you here as long as possible. So let's do a speed round and let's find out what do you see as the next big challenge for your organization? What's the next big asset management mountain that you need to climb? Because clearly, to have gotten to where you're at, you've climbed a lot of mountains. So let's see what's the next big one, and let's start with Brad.
So yeah, we, as I mentioned, we did the maturity assessment back in 2018, and we actually revisited that about 2 months ago just to see where are we versus where we had planned to be from a short-term perspective. And one area that was highlighted as needing a bit more focus around asset information and data management in general. So I think that's a big challenge ahead for us. Is really that granularity on the asset, like what level we have equipment tags, what we call them in OPG, is really trying to report on those equipment tags so you have the right information in our work management system, the right information in our ER tool, in C55, and utilizing that equipment tag to tie all these systems together. So I think that's a big challenge. Another one is really trying to align our engineering risk assessment process. It's a 5x5 matrix now, and trying to align that to the enterprise value framework, so we're all speaking to the same risk matrix. So I think that's some of the big challenges for us going forward.
Okay, Maria.
Well, I'm an optimist, and so I see it not as challenges, but opportunities in our road ahead. So if I think about some of our opportunities, I think identifying the data needed for data-driven decisions, process documentation for aligning processes across the different energy delivery assets, like Brad, calibrating a risk framework to articulate the risk part of the balance of cost, performance, and risk. But if I think about our biggest challenge, like we're a people-driven organization and we've figured out how to work virtually thanks to COVID. But I don't want to underestimate the challenge that we're going to face as we go back into the office. And while not specifically an asset management mountain, it's certainly part of the asset management equation.
Yeah, that's a real one. Peter.
I echo what Brad says. We're actually working on a asset information standard. We've got lots of elements, and we've improved our asset information over the last couple of years. We've actually had some contractors working with us to improve that. But now, I want to get into that commercial space. The decision makers and the people that define our levels of service requirements, I want to make sure that the data and the information is there for that decision making, that risk evaluation on a tactical and a strategic basis. is really managed the same way as in a similar fashion as we do with our literally our asset information. So we're creating a standard that's going to be holistic right across our business unit, and I need to do some work to make sure that's well received and is rolled out and is implemented. I think the other thing with our risk management system, we want those feeds of where our equipment condition is right now and the risk associated is fed up into the commercial decision making and the risk evaluation of our business plan tactically and strategically. And I think that's going to be our next challenge. I think just coming back from a lot of people working from home as well, I think we've lost a little bit of momentum on the transformational kind of approach of the organisation with asset management, and it's going to take a bit of time to rev back up and start moving forward. All the embedded or the robust processes have continued, and people have done a very good job, I think, working from home and doing transactional work. It's worked well. But the transformational piece, I think, is difficult from home. So it's get people back into the office and then start working on that transformational work, which is again, there's a load more process mapping and embedding those asset management activities within the organisation. And what we find is it's a bit like squeezing a balloon. You squeeze it and it pops out in different places, and you push in and it pops out somewhere else. And we're seeing that, and that's sometimes that's a change of characters and people in different roles. They move on, and you've got to re-engage with the new person and try and sell asset management, why it's important, why we're doing it. Okay, so it's just a constant focus on embedding asset management activities within the organisation. So that was a long answer, but that's it.
Very well. Warren.
So I like the way Marie said that opportunities is better. For us, opportunities at Nova Scotia Power, a big one is the integration of our transmission distribution side into this world of asset management. Changing the vocabulary. They have their own way of doing things. They have for a long time. They're not going to change things today. They have experts in their silos, and their silos, they are quite good. And we want to learn from that. We want to adopt that into generation, and we want to push a little bit of what we have in generation into T&D. We have to be careful with how that's done. So even though we've been integrating for about 3 years, we haven't been able to manifest a one-size-fits-all approach. And it looks like we're not going to, and that's all for the right reasons. So an opportunity / challenge for us is to make sure that integration with asset management within our T&D side of the business looks a lot like ours, so that it's easy as a power corporation to be able to effectively say, this is our program, here are the stages across these parts of the business, and they all align very well. Another big challenge for us is this constantly changing functional context of all of our equipment. So on the thermal side, coal being phased out, everything is changing, and it's changing rapidly, and it's changing quicker than we anticipated a few years ago. And that's being brought on by a number of factors, as most of you know. So the way we operate and manage those coal-fired units today is completely different than it was 5 years ago, and it's going to look completely different again in a decade. In a decade, and our business comes up very fast. So not only do we have to consider how we're operating those, but how do the asset management programs change? How do we optimize the PM strategies? How do we change the amount of personnel that we're using in these stations if we're shutting units down over the course of time? When we shut the units down, how do we manage that transition? One of our esteemed folks in our group called it the glide path. How do we manage the glide path of a coal unit into its future as a mothballed station or scrap? How do we manage the environmental impacts of that? And that's something that's growing in our business, and it's something for us that's going to present itself as almost its own division in asset management. Is going to play a big role in how we manage those pieces of equipment into their end of life.
Excellent. And so I think I'll hand over to Wes at this point, because I think we've come to the end of the question. So Wes?
Yeah, I think that was a good question to end on. I think that was a very good question to end on. I think you guys did a great job. And I just want to say thank you to all the panelists. I think this has been fantastic. You guys spending your valuable time to talk to us and to share your knowledge and your experience is very appreciated. And I think I know I appreciate it, and I'm sure everyone on the call does as well. So thank you all very much. Also like to thank the audience. You know, we've received a bunch of good questions. I think this was a really great discussion. It's nice to see the interaction and people typing questions into the chat and so on. So thank you, audience, for connecting with us today and taking the time out of your day. Just a couple of last things, I guess. There is going to be a survey sent out. I think you should get that in your email tomorrow morning. The survey, you know, we ask that everyone kind of take their time and fill out the survey, value the responses, and it helps us improve on these webinars in the future. So we do take your input and it helps us improve. So thank you in advance for filling in the surveys. I guess the last thing to say is the next webinar. So Bonnie touched on it in the beginning, but the next webinar, I believe, is scheduled for October the 31st. Is that right, Suzanne?
I think it's around that time. Yes.
That's Halloween, but anyway.
The next webinar, sorry, the next webinar will be on December 1st.
Oh, December 1st.
Okay. I was going to say maybe everyone is going to have to dress up for that one. Thanks, Eric.
Thank you, Eric.
So December the 1st is the next webinar, and that's going to be, I think, panelists from the housing sector. So I think that should be a very interesting spin on their take on asset management as well. I'm not sure if there's any other administrative things, Eric, maybe, but I think
that's everything.
Well, thank you, everybody, and we've come to the end of the session. We really appreciate your time and your effort and your energy and passion. Have a wonderful evening.
Yes.